Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video we're going to react to the geography of sports team markets in the US. One thing I've noticed is that some states will have multiple teams, like the New York Knicks, the New York Nets, so they've got two basketball teams, two football teams, the Giants and the Jets. But then some states don't have any teams, like Nebraska. I don't believe they have a basketball team, do they? Or a football team. Why is that? From the top of my head, I would imagine it's probably because a state like New York, such a powerful, wealthy state, the financial market is there, I guess. But wouldn't putting a team somewhere like Nebraska create a whole new market potentially? Because that population of people would have a team to support, they would buy tickets, they would buy merch, etc., etc. So how does it work?
Howdy, it's Kyle discussing the geography of sports teams markets. And if you're someone that doesn't follow sports, this video isn't about the actual sports themselves, but rather the geographic sphere of influence that individual teams might have. And if you are someone that follows sports, you've probably heard the terms small market franchise or large market franchise. So in this video, I'll be discussing what that actually means and confirming or debunking whether or not some of these teams actually are a small or large market. First, a few definitions. A metropolitan area is a city plus its suburbs and exurbs. A consolidated metropolitan area are multiple metros that are so large they've grown into each other. So this would be like Washington, Baltimore, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Dallas, Fort Worth, and there are many other ones like that in the country. A television market are those areas plus the surrounding rural areas. So essentially, when you turn your local news on, where's it coming from? And finally, a sports market is not.
Wow, okay. So these are the NFL teams. I see. So you have teams that are kind of covering multiple states, whereas then you have certain teams that are just unique, or not unique, I suppose, but kind of exclusive to one particular state. Like these are the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? So this is like a Florida-based team. I guess that's the only one, really. Because you got the Washington Redskins, but you can see them kind of going into the other state above them.
Not necessarily any of those previous ones, but just a general sphere of influence that a certain team might have. And this is relevant because you don't have to be living within the metro area or the TV market to be contributing to that team. You could be way out in the sticks and you're still buying shirts and hats and jerseys and you're still paying that expensive TV package to watch all the games. So you're still contributing financially to that team, even though you don't live in the immediate area.
It's kind of crazy that Canada only has the Raptors. Because for such a big country, I would think that they would have at least 3-4 NBA teams. Maybe a team for, so this is the Toronto Raptors, Calgary, maybe.
And the way things work nowadays, most teams get most of their money from TV. So it's ad revenue that they're making most of their money from. So you don't have to be right in the town to be sending them money. As long as you're watching the game, watching those commercials, they're making money. And attendance is still important. Of course, teams want a full stadium or a full arena, but the teams can still make money even if the games aren't selling out. I'm not going to go over every market for every team, but I want to give an example of what I'm talking about when I say sports market. New York City is the largest metro in the U.S., and it consists of the 5 boroughs of New York City, the rest of Long Island, the northern half of New Jersey, the counties just north of the Bronx, so Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, and Orange, as well as Fairfield County, Connecticut. So that whole area has about 21 million people, which makes it by far the largest metro in the U.S. But the New York City sports market extends well beyond that metropolitan area, so people that live in, say, Syracuse, Albany, Binghamton, and other parts of the state often root for the New York City teams, and you're not going to find too many folks in Albany rooting for the Boston teams. For baseball and basketball, the New York City sports market extends pretty much the entire state of New York, the northern half of New Jersey, as well as Connecticut. So that's close to 30 million people in that sports market. However, in hockey, there's a separate team that plays in Buffalo and one in New Jersey. So the New York City sports market doesn't extend as far in hockey as it does in baseball and basketball. And for football, there's a separate team in Buffalo as well. Now, certainly the Buffalo area is not going to be anywhere near as large as the New York City area, but you're talking about the Buffalo, Niagara Falls metro area plus the Rochester area. So the whole western part of New York has about 3.5 million or so people, but also the southeastern portion of Ontario, Canada. But I'm not talking about Canada in this video, but some of those people that live on the Canadian side of the Buffalo area are going to be rooting for Buffalo sports teams.
I mean, it's crazy that New York, being the wealthy, super powerful state that it is, hasn't had a successful, and I mean winning NBA or NFL team for years. I mean, I can't tell you, like, a New York basketball team has not won the championship since I've been following the NBA. Like, and I've been following the NBA for like years now. Same with football. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time the New York Giants won a Super Bowl, was that like Lawrence Taylor's? Was that when he was there? Or have they won it since? I genuinely don't know. Like, for the amount of money that they're probably spending on players, players like Saquon Barkley and all that, like, how have they not won a championship?
So obviously New York City is the largest metro and sports market in the country, but I wanted to use that just as an example because there are other ones that are a little more debatable. If I were to ask baseball fans, what's the second largest baseball market? Most people would probably say Los Angeles because it is the second largest metro area in the country, but it is in fact Atlanta. The Atlanta Braves' sphere of influence is enormous. It's basically the entire southeast outside of Florida. The Atlanta metro area alone has over 6 million people, which is pretty large, but the sphere of influence includes the entire state of Georgia with about 10.5 million people, all of Alabama with about 4.5 million,
huge
all of
market.
South Carolina with over 5 million, Eastern Tennessee with over 5 million, and portions of Mississippi and North Carolina. So the overall Atlanta Braves sphere of influence is about 30 million people, which is about the same as a New York City baseball sports market. And whenever talks come up about possibly expanding the teams in Major League Baseball, the number one spot they always talk about is somewhere in the Southeast. So Nashville or Charlotte would be the most logical places for expansion because the Braves area is so huge and there's plenty of room for other teams in there. But that's only true for baseball. And other sports.
But the Atlanta Braves probably wouldn't be so much of a fan for, another team springing up in their territory because they would lose out potentially on fans buying merchandise, fans wanting to go to the games. So they would lose, quite a bit of revenue, wouldn't they?
The Atlanta market is significantly smaller. So, for example, in football, the Atlanta Falcons' sphere of influence is nowhere near as large as the Braves. There are separate NFL teams in both Nashville and Charlotte, so fans in Tennessee or the Carolinas tend to root for the teams in those cities and not the Falcons. Alabama still tends to lean a little more towards the Atlanta Falcons, but there are still plenty of fans in Alabama that root for the Tennessee team. And pro football fans in Mississippi tend to root for the New Orleans Saints, so the sphere of influence for the Atlanta Falcons is less than half of that for the Atlanta Braves. Another interesting example I wanted to bring up is Green Bay, Wisconsin. And even if you're not a football fan, you've probably heard of the Green Bay Packers. They're one of the most well-known teams in football. And you may ask, how does Green Bay have a pro team? There's only about 100,000 people in the city, and there are only about 500,000 people in the entire Green Bay metro area.
It's crazy how, look at the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers when, he was really sort of dominating and winning championships. Population of 100,000 in the Green Bay area versus New York City, like the Giants having millions and millions of fans and stuff like that, and the power of New York City behind them, and they can't win a championship.
But the sphere of influence for the Packers goes well beyond Green Bay. It pretty much extends throughout the entire state of Wisconsin, which includes the large metro area of Milwaukee, and the overall state has just under 6 million people. There are probably portions of northwestern Wisconsin where people root for the Minnesota Vikings, but there are also probably portions of the Michigan UP that root for the Packers. Now I want to discuss a few markets that in sports have traditionally been referred to as small markets, but in today's world where TV deals mean more than attendance, these places really can't be called small markets anymore. The first is Kansas City. The Kansas City metropolitan area has just over 2 million people, which is a relatively small metro for a pro sports team. However, the KC sphere of influence extends well beyond Kansas City. It includes basically all of western Missouri, which has about 3 million people, as well as the entire state of...
It was Aaron Rodgers at the Packers, yeah, not Ben Roethlisberger. No, it was definitely Aaron Rodgers.
Kansas has about 3 million people. But it also extends into parts of Nebraska, and many folks in the Omaha area root for the Kansas City teams. So the overall Kansas City sports market is about 6 to 8 million people or so, which makes it not a very small market at all. The second is Cincinnati, which also has a metropolitan area of just over 2 million people. But just barely 45 minutes up the road is the Dayton-Springfield metro area, which has over 1 million people itself. And then within Ohio, you have the Columbus metro area, which has over 2 million people as well, which is right in the middle of the state. It's hard to get a good gauge on this for sure, but I would say in Columbus, it's about 60-40 in favor of the Cincinnati teams over the Cleveland teams. Plus, Eastern Kentucky falls within the Cincinnati sports sphere of influence. You go down to Lexington, you're seeing Cincinnati Reds and Bengal stuff all around town. And you also have quite a few folks in the Louisville area rooting for the Cincinnati teams. So just like Kansas City, I would say this sports market has about 6 to 8 million people, which isn't small at all.
That's a lot of cheese. Wow. Look at the amount of cheese on this hot dog.
And the third one in this same group is Pittsburgh, which also has a metropolitan area of just over 2 million people. But pretty much all of Western PA falls within the Pittsburgh sports sphere of influence. There's about 4 million people in the western part.
Sidney Crosby, is he still playing? Like, where does he rank in terms of, best of all time in ice hockey? Because from what I've heard, you've got Gretzky, number one, and then you've kind of got a few players like beneath Gretzky, like Crosby. Crosby definitely belongs in that list, doesn't he? Right.
State. You also have plenty of Pittsburgh fans in the Youngstown, Ohio area, and pretty much all of West Virginia pro sports fans root for the Pittsburgh teams. All of my in-laws are in West Virginia, and they're all Steelers and Penguins fans, so you're going to see Pittsburgh sports stuff all the way down to Charleston, West Virginia. So just like Kansas City and Cincinnati, Pittsburgh's sphere of influence is about 6 to 8 million people. So all three of these have about the same metro area size, and all three have about the same sphere of influence size, and makes all three of them not small markets. And I also want to make special note of Oakland, California, which for years has been playing the Little Sisters of the Poor card when it comes to the size of their market. I don't know who you're trying to fool, Oakland, but you're located within the very large San Francisco Bay Area. It's just that the Oakland A's are the less popular team within that region. It would be like saying the Chicago White Sox or the New York Jets are small market teams because they're the less popular team in a large metro area. So which sports markets are actually small? Well, I would say there are only 6 small sports markets in the entire country.
I will say, have you guys seen the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt? That movie really made me interested in the Oakland A's, just like how he designed, the coach of the Oakland A's designed that system, that stats-based system, and how they became a winning team with that, despite having such a smaller budget than the other teams. Great movie if you haven't seen it.
Between NFL, NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and Major League Soccer, about 150 teams or so total, there are only 8 teams that play in a small market. And I would use the cutoff for a small market as being 4 million people. That's kind of an arbitrary number, but there are 6 markets that have under 4 million, and then none in the 4 million range, and all the other ones have over 5 million. So there is kind of a natural break at 4 million. And I'm going to kind of count down these 6. And the 6th is Salt Lake City, Utah, which is home to both the Utah Jazz basketball team and the Real Salt Lake Major League Soccer team. The Salt Lake City metro area has about 2.5 million people, and its sphere of influence includes pretty much the entire state of Utah, which has about 3.2 million.
Wow, what a beautiful shot. Being able to see this every day would be amazing.
But the reach for the Salt Lake sports teams does extend into portions of Wyoming and Idaho, but those are lightly populated areas, so the overall Salt Lake City sphere of influence is under 4 million. At number 5 is the aforementioned Buffalo area, which is home to both the football and hockey team. It's hard to get a good gauge on just how large the Buffalo sports sphere of influence is because I'm not really sure where Syracuse falls in terms of it's more New York City or more Buffalo, and also how many folks in southeastern Ontario are rooting for the Buffalo sports teams. But no matter how you slice it, the Buffalo sports market is under 4 million people. The 4th smallest market is one you might be surprised by, and that's San Diego. The city of San Diego is the 8th largest in the U.S. San Diego County is the 5th largest in the U.S., and the San Diego metropolitan area is the 20th largest in the U.S. with about 3.4 million people.
Wow, this looks gorgeous. Is San Diego quite a high cost of living area? Is it more expensive, less expensive than living in San Francisco, for example? Because they're both in, California. Because yeah, this looks great. It looks very similar to LA with the palm trees and stuff like that. Is it a nicer place to live these days than LA and San Francisco?
They only have one team, the San Diego Padres baseball team, but the sphere of influence doesn't extend past San Diego at all. There are probably a handful of Padres fans in Orange County and probably a few baseball fans in Tijuana as well, but overall, the San Diego metropolitan area is pretty much the entire sports market, which is about 3.4 million. The third smallest is Las Vegas, which is home to the Golden Knights hockey team and the Raiders football team, and yeah, there's a hockey team in Las Vegas. And even if you count the entire state of Nevada as part of the Vegas sphere of influence, there's only 3.1 million people.
Small population.
But because both of these Las Vegas teams are new, a lot of the fans in the Reno Lake Tahoe area are actually rooting for Northern California sports teams. So it's actually probably under 3 million people for the Las Vegas sphere of influence. But either way, it's a pretty small market. The second smallest sports market in the U.S. is the Sacramento Kings for basketball. Even though the Sacramento metropolitan area has about 2.5 million people, its sphere of influence doesn't really extend much farther than that. There are some Kings fans in Stockton and Redding and other parts of the far north of California, as well as the Reno Lake Tahoe area, but overall, this sports market is about 3 million people. And the smallest sports market in the country belongs to the Jacksonville Jaguars of the NFL. The Jacksonville metropolitan area has about 1.5 million people, but they don't really have a large following outside of that northeastern portion of Florida. There are separate teams in both Tampa and Miami. Those tend to get the majority of pro football fans in Florida.
Right.
There are some Jaguars fans in the Florida Panhandle and a few in the Orlando area as well.
Oh my God, is this during a game? Wow, this is such a sparsely filled stadium. Like, is a game going on right now? I mean, this looks like this stadium probably isn't even a quarter full.
Overall, the Jaguars' sphere of influence is barely 2.5 million people, making it the smallest in the country. So that's my analysis of...
How much would tickets be to watch a Jacksonville Jaguars game? They can't be that expensive, can they? Because of
sports markets in the U.S. And I think it's pretty interesting because it's just another layer, another way of looking at an area or a region. And oftentimes the sports market aren't conforming to a metro area or a TV market. And oftentimes it's a source of pride for people in that region. And oftentimes it conforms with state boundaries. I hope you liked this video.
Great video. Super interesting video. What I take from this is that there's certain teams that it's going to be very, very hard for them to attract the top talent, outside of the draft system, like a team like the Sacramento Kings, because their market is so small, their share of the TV revenue is going to be proportionally quite small. So being able to offer huge contracts to players is not going to be within the realm of possibility for those teams. So they're kind of almost, limited in their potential unless they can develop a superstar, like literally from the ground up, or maybe if they, get a draft pick, a number one, draft pick, and he actually comes through and lives up to that potential, being able to trade for a player like, LeBron or Giannis or whoever, the top players, it's going to be really, really hard. So, but then, when you take that into account, teams that are able to trade for those big players, offer those massive max contracts, like the New York Knicks or the Nets, like, look at the Nets. They at one point had Kyrie and KD, on the same team. I'm sure I'm forgetting, I think they had another big player at the time, and they couldn't get, into the NBA finals with that team. It's just, it just goes to show that having money to spend isn't always a guarantee of winning. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoy my videos, please help me out by liking and subscribing.